Well, thank you very much, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. Nancy and I have, for most of our careers, been forecasters. She specializes more in economic forecasting. I specialize perhaps more in the financial side of the forecasting. We discovered probably 12, 13 years ago, as we looked back to the prior year at that time, to see how we might improve our forecast. We concluded that we did okay, but maybe what we were missing that could really improve our forecast would be to factor in much more of the big monster trends that are buffeting all of us. So we set about, that many years ago, we set about actually looking into what are the major trends that are taking place in this country. The trends that will affect you, your family, your business over the next 2 years, 20 years, 30 years. And what I want to share with you tonight are the results in capsule form of our research from that time over a decade ago. You'll be surprised by some of these trends. Others you'll say, oh, I kind of understand about that one. But there will be time at the end for questions, so if you'd hold off on those, but maybe jot down as we go through these megatrends, jot down how they might apply to you in your business. Jot down what opportunities and what problems each one of these megatrends might create for you. Well, let's begin by looking at one of the initial discoveries that we made. Let me introduce you to the first of two gentlemen that were very helpful as we began to build a foundation for our research. This fellow you probably don't recognize at all. This is Jean-Baptiste Alphonse Karr. He was the editor of Le Figaro in Paris in the mid-19th century. And he's the one who coined the phrase, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. Well, in English, that's the more things change, the more they remain the same. Once you understand that, it begins to make forecasting these megatrends a lot easier, because you can dispense with many, many activities that are taking place that are physical laws, social laws, biological laws, and concentrate on the really large changes that are taking place. And here's the second gentleman that was very helpful to us in building a foundation on which to forecast these larger trends. You probably don't recognize him either, but you might recognize his name. This is John Nesbitt. In 1980, he wrote a groundbreaking book called the title of our presentation, which is Megatrends. Yes, he's the person that coined that word. There was no such word in the dictionary prior to Nesbitt. Now there is. He also could see what Karr was pointing out, that a lot of these things don't change. And so we really leaned into a lot of the research that Nesbitt did to bring you the 10 huge gorilla trends that I'm about to show you. Now, I want to begin with the megatrend number 10, and we'll kind of go through the 10 megatrends, and with each one, I'll try to show you what it is, how it might benefit you, or how you might have to defend yourself against it. Okay, let's get started. Megatrend number 10. Services rule. Why are these ladies smiling. These ladies are agricultural workers in Bhutan, and they lead a happy life. A study suggests that the workers in Bhutan are among the happiest in the world. Well, they may be happy, but their types of folks who are involved in agriculture are sort of a vanishing breed. Around the world for the past 200 years, this megatrend number 10, the movement towards workers not being in agriculture, but being in industry and then being in services, has taken place and ground forward and has another 100 years to go. Well, if we look at agricultural workers, the percent of workforce now in the world, in Bhutan, Tanzania, India, to some degree China, it's still the case that most of the workers are agricultural. But when we look at, if you will, the so-called developed world, my goodness, Europe, the United States, under 10%. Well, let's look at the United States particularly. This enormous megatrend of change from being involved in agriculture started 200 years ago, about the time our country started. You can look back to 1776, back to 1800. Over 90% of the workers in the United States were involved in agriculture. Look how that's come down over the years. This megatrend at work. Until now, only 2% of U.S. workers are in agriculture. Over the decades, many workers have moved to industry, but the real gorilla, the biggie, is services. Today, most workers are involved in services. So this megatrend has another 100 years to go, and it still matters. I want to tell you the story about a young lady named Regina Whitaker. She worked at a shop like this plant in North Carolina in the textile industry. One day her boss came in and said, "Ladies, next Friday the plant's closing. You'll have your final check." Rather than whining to her congressman and saying, as perhaps others who would be in agriculture and more likely in industry like Detroit auto workers, construction workers in Southern California, that I lost my job because the government wasn't doing something correctly, or the managers are no good, or the unions are no good, or it's foreign competition. She said, "I get it. I need to be in services." And so she went out and she went back to school. She got a 2-year degree in the biological sciences. And here is Regina Whitaker, the actual gal, at her new company. It's a service research firm that serves the pharmaceutical industry. What did she learn? She learned about this megatrend, this gorilla, and she learned she needed more education, but that's where she wanted to be, in the services arena. Megatrend number 9. This is the onward march of miniaturization, of seeking conciseness, of seeking compactness. I'm going to talk primarily about the hardware side of this megatrend, less is more. This gentleman here is David Bowie's manager. He lives in Hawaii. He has this enormous stereo set. It's terrific. Cost him tens of thousands of dollars. But you know, if you went back 50 years ago, perhaps your parents or you might have seen stereo sets that are not this large, but pretty large. In order to get good sound, you needed something like this, and you would spend thousands of dollars. Well, times have changed, and miniaturization has taken over. In 1980, Sony came out with the Sony Walkman. Oh, it was about 10% of the really good stereo set in terms of price at that time. And it had incredible fidelity. People were shocked. But that was the miniaturization that was taking place. Less is more. But you know, it didn't stop in 1980. And today, you take that $200 price, cut it down by 90%. So for $20, you can get something that has very, very good fidelity and is even smaller. Today, the MP3 player. Well, the ultimate in smallness and less is more, is nanotechnology. What's a nano? That's a billionth, 1 billionth. So a nanometer is 1 billionth of a meter. This is part of this enormous megatrend towards smallness and miniaturization. The nanoparticles, the nanotechnologies are used in very innovative techniques and methods in the military and in medical. And we're finding that even cancer cells better watch out because a nanobot can come and attack them. Megatrend number 8. I'm calling it global warming because that's sort of what's in vogue these days. But really what I'm looking at here is the environmental concerns, the megatrend of environmental concerns. I'm going to concentrate on global warming because I want you to get a good understanding that these megatrends like global warming and like the environmental concerns have to be constantly checked out and researched. Things change in these megatrends. Let me give you an example. And by the way, I'm not taking sides on this global warming issue. There are those of you who may feel this is nothing more than a kind of a cruel hoax. There are other of you who would feel like, no, this is very serious stuff, and that ice is going to melt and the polar bear is going to fall into the water. Well, I want to talk a little bit about why you have to take a very close look at what's going on in these megatrends, and particularly this one on environmental concerns. What you're looking at here is a coal-fired utility with, when it was remodeled with these smokestacks, had state-of-the-art pollution control. In other words, those big smokestacks that cost millions of dollars were scrubbing the air so what came out was clean. What you see coming out of the smokestacks is nothing more than water vapor, steam, and of course a lot of CO2 and other clear gases like that, which were not considered harmful. All of a sudden today, because of global warming, they're considered a problem. What is CO2? That's carbon dioxide. Many scientists feel that additional carbon dioxide from things like this utility plant, which again, 30 years ago, this was state of the art. No noxious fumes, but today, no. Carbon dioxide may very well create a greenhouse gas, which creates global warming, which makes the polar bear fall into the water. Now, what is carbon dioxide? Oh, we're all familiar with that because every time you take a breath out, you're breathing out carbon dioxide. When you open a can of Coke or a bottle of champagne and you hear that fizz, that's carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide was generally considered to be a very friendly sort of gas. Well, we know it's friendly to plants. Plants, as we use oxygen in order to live and survive, plants use carbon dioxide. It's such a wonderful thing for plants that I recall a study that was done in the United Kingdom where they published a paper and they gave the paper at a conference. And what the paper was on, what their research entailed was trying to get an understanding whether plants grow better if you talk to them. Now, I'm not making this up. Do plants grow better if you talk to them? They had greenhouses where they put plants that they just left alone, and another set of plants, and they controlled for light and heat and moisture and so forth and so on. And one set of plants they talked to. They had the graduate students, and they're talking to them all the time, having heavy-duty discussions. And the other bunch, nobody talked to them. What they discovered, and they stopped their research after about 8-9 weeks, because what they discovered was that the plants that the graduate students were talking to were doing much better. They were growing faster, they were greener, there were more leaves, and so forth and so on. So they gave this paper. Afterwards, one of the conference attendees came up and said, you probably have to go back and redo that because I think your findings are totally false. They said, well, no, you saw the numbers. And he said, well, I'll tell you what. Uh, I think that the plants that grew better because the graduate students spoke to them was because you tell me how close they were from the plants. And the scientists said, well, they were, 2 feet, 3 feet away, something like that. I said, well, they were breathing on them. And they were breathing out carbon dioxide. Plants use carbon dioxide. Of course they did better. So life is never easy, but like that, we have to look at carbon dioxide and say, greenhouse gas, what's going on? The scientists kind of say where we can control carbon dioxide and that type of greenhouse gas is primarily, you see the red portion, energy, that be utilities and so forth, energy supply, or the yellow in transport and so forth. But look, there's a lot of other areas where you could control carbon dioxide. Agriculture. Well, wait a minute. There's Elsie the cow. What's she got to do with carbon dioxide and global warming? Well, Elsie chews on the grass and eats it, and then chews her cud. And as she chews her cud, apparently, for those of you who are familiar with dairy farms, she then belches. She constantly belches. Well, what is she belching? She's belching carbon dioxide. Is this a problem? Yes. So Elsie is like that coal-fired utility plant. She's creating a problem. Now, is anybody going to take this seriously? Well, your representatives in Washington, the Congress, has put into the climate change bill a tax on Elsie. So if you're a dairy farmer, you may be shocked to see that you too are going to get hit by this carbon dioxide stuff, because the tax is $175 on Elsie each year. If you have pigs, it's only $25 a year. So serious stuff. Serious for the dairy farmer, serious for you and me as a consumer. Well, is there a way to profit from this carbon dioxide and global warming and so forth and so on, environmental concerns? Well, here's a gentleman who's decided he's going to be has concerns for the environment, and he's going to make some money from it. He says, if I stay in bed, I'm not using up the Earth's resources, and I use less oxygen just in being quiet here. And what I'm going to do is I didn't get into the car and go anywhere. I'm going to I'm going to try to register for carbon credits and then sell them on eBay. But there are lots of opportunities in the overall environmental concern megatrend. I want to point to one that's not related to global warming, but it's related to the environmental issues. And you might want to take a look for your business or as a consumer, some of the very innovative things that people are doing. Now, this is actually a picture of an ad that I saw in a business publication, and I initially thought, well, there's a joke. I don't know what this is. Well, it's a serious business ad from Falcon Water-Free Technologies. It's not involved with carbon credits. It's involved with water conservation. Falcon Water-Free Technologies has developed a special ceramic cartridge that fits into men's urinals in commercial and industrial sites. So the advantage of this ceramic filter is that there's no need for any water. So gentlemen, you may have been involved, you may have already experienced one of these Falcon Water-Free Technologies if you went to, say, Dodger Stadium. And after you conduct your business and you're looking for the little flush handle to flush, and there's no flush handle. And of course you might have thought, oh, well, that's one of these, it's a motion sensor, so when I move away, water will flush. And then you might notice that, hey, there aren't any pipes going to this thing anymore. That's because they've gone to Falcon Water-Free Technologies. Tremendous saving for businesses. The payback period, you can go to the little wizard that they have on the Falcon Water-Free website and see how much you can save as a business. The payback period's, say, 6 to 9 months, and then you're saving lots of money. In the meantime, those who are concerned with the environment, in this case related to water conservation, are thrilled that you're able to do this without using any water whatsoever. Well, you know the story about the patient who went to the psychiatrist and he said they're watching me, doctor. They're monitoring me. And the doctor examined him, talked to him, and said, "Well, here, take these pills. I have to do some tests, and come back in a week." When the patient came back, the doctor says, "I have fantastic good news and a little bit of bad news." The patient said, "Well, doc, I could use some good news." So the doc says, "Well, the good news is you don't have paranoia. We were concerned about that. You don't have paranoia." So the patient says, "Well, what's the bad news?" The doc says, "They are watching you." Well, megatrend number 7 involves not only that they, which means somebody other than yourself, are watching you, they are listening to you, they are monitoring your temperature, they're smelling you, they're counting your clicks on your computer. Google is, of course, tracking where you go on your internet searches and keeping them forever. But let's go back to they're watching you. How easy is this? Look at the picture of the globe. This is actually a picture from outer space. This is a picture of Los Angeles International Airport from 30 miles up. Oh, you can't see LAX? Well, it's down there. Let me take the satellite and make a little adjustment to its lens. I'm still up there on that satellite, but I've just gone down to, maybe 30,000 feet, 16,000 feet, something like that. Can you see LAX now? Well, it's over there in Santa Monica Bay. Maybe you need to adjust the lens. We can adjust the lens a little bit more and go down to, say, 6,000 feet. There, now you see Santa Monica Bay and LAX. Hey, we're still looking at this from up on the satellite. Or maybe you can take it down to 1,000 feet, and I can keep going down to smaller and smaller. There are many commercial applications of that spy in the sky, so to speak, but and they're very useful for farmers, for industrialists, for people who are doing real estate location, for marine biologists. There's all kinds of good applications. And actually coming down to maybe this 1,000-foot level is quite adequate for them. The military can go down. They can tell what newspaper you're reading. We're probably more familiar with this kind of they're watching you, the cameras, on the roadways. And let's face it, those cameras are everywhere. It starts out with cameras, and we can see the pictures on our TV occasionally where they show them. Oh, here's Caltrans camera downtown LA, and you can see how traffic is moving. But my goodness, it's gone to now where most large cities are installing cameras on every corner. So, if you're looking at those people who get involved where they try to elude the police and there's this big car chase, that may be coming to an end in Los Angeles. Why? Because with the use of, helicopters that are kind of casual about following the suspect racing along in the car, to all these cameras on all the blocks, why, the suspect can turn around and say, "Hey, nobody's following me, I'm okay." Well, they've been watching you for blocks. They say, well, he turned left, he turned right, he's going ahead. Sometimes we think of all these cameras as, they're very sophisticated spy tools, but, they aren't. And that means that Big Brother could be anybody, anywhere. Well, Big Brother could be you. Oh, let's say you're the owner of a small business, and you always wondered, what are those employees doing down in the lunchroom? Well, I can get you this little 2-speed fan. You see the little 2-speed thing there, plugs into the wall, 2-speed. It works. It's a nice little small fan. You don't have to run the fan to take advantage of the little surprise, which is that pinhole there. That's a transmitting camera. Yeah. It will transmit up to 100 yards away, like the football field, to a very small receiver that plugs into the back of your computer, just like your flash drive. So you as employer, and you could be up to 100 yards away from this lunchroom, you just go on your computer and you go, oh, okay, let's see what's on such and such, where this little receiver is, and you can be watching your employees. Well, you think $289 is too expensive. How about a how about a smoke alarm? This is a working smoke alarm with a little surprise. See the little pinhole up there? That's the transmitting. That's the little transceiver that's sending out the picture. Well, I had an executive come up to me after one of my presentations, and he was very alarmed. He said, Victor, I go to motels and hotels all the time on business. I'm out on the road. And he says, they all got these smoke alarms. Are they watching me? And I said, well, probably not. But, if you see one, say, like this, what you want to do, let's say it's up in the ceiling. Because he said, the manager's office or the security office or whatever, they're certainly within the length of a football field from my room. I mean, this is terrible. I said, no, you get up on the chair, if this is in the ceiling, and that white plastic is held in by a spring, and if you just kind of pull it down very gently, you don't want to pull it off, just pull it down, because what you want to do is you want to peek in there, and you want to check to see if there's a little 9-volt battery. You might have a smoke alarm like this at home, except it doesn't have the surprise in it. If you find a little 9-volt battery, and that's fine. If you see two 9-volt batteries, you probably ought to get down off the chair, because they are watching you. The second 9-volt battery is for what. We would think by now that this megatrend, hey, this is the one I'm almost kind of like, I don't know, should I show this? Everybody knows this. But a lot of people just don't get it. From people that you consider to be really very sophisticated, take the Israeli spies that went and did a bad thing to a fella in a hotel in Dubai. And, they were tracked on camera. You could see their movements. And it's like, didn't they know? But let's look to these guys here. There's these three gentlemen. The one you can't quite see. I'll introduce you to him in a minute. These three gentlemen are taking contraband out of a Las Vegas hotel. Now, are these guys, they don't look very sophisticated, but are they so stupid as to not think that nobody's watching them? Well, I guess they are, and they went to the pokey, and of course the celebrity that was the third. There you probably recognize O.J. Simpson, who now has gone to the clink because he was stupid enough not to understand that, yes, O.J., they are watching you. Megatrend number 7. Well, meet the bubbleheads. They're in their own world. I've got a feeling maybe you and I are bubbleheads in our own little virtual world. We don't typically think that this is a problem necessarily. I mean, here's a little girl. She's in her own little world. Call it a virtual world. She's there. She's talking to her dolly. This is not a big deal. She's talking to her dolly. Well, he's talking to someone too. He's in his own little world. He's a bubblehead. So probably we all are bubbleheads. But it creates some interesting possibilities and problems. Sociologists say that what this bubblehead virtuality does is gives a sense of connectedness that's both positive and negative. It's positive because it can bring very considerable productivity to business, and it can possibly enhance close, say, family or friend relationships. But they also say that it's a negative, and they lean back to, say, Durkheim, the famous sociologist in Europe a long time ago, who was very concerned about people when they moved to the cities and not connecting with others generally, if you will, in humanity. And this happens to us. I mean, think about it. When you go, say, to the airport, you're going to catch a plane, and you're in the waiting room, and oh, there it goes up on the board, flight delayed 1 hour, and so you're sitting there in one of the benches. Do you naturally turn these days to the people to your left and right around the bench and say, hey, well, wow, look at that. American Airlines, there they go again. You probably don't, because, like me, you're probably a little bit of a bubblehead. So the minute you see that delay, what do? You reach in and you get out your BlackBerry or some other device, and you start checking for your emails, or you start tweeting, and your thumb starts really working. This new virtual society for us as bubbleheads has some tremendous opportunities. One of the areas is in entertainment and in games. I'm showing here this young lady and her avatar, her sort of make-believe person who exists. That's her on the right, her avatar, exists on the internet. So it can be a lot of fun for entertainment. How about in business or perhaps in your career? Tremendous opportunities here in many ways, but I'll just mention one which relates to training. This is actually a picture that's taken from a console that is developed, a little sort of like semi-little itty-bitty room that has controls that look just like the control booth for this large crane that picks up and deposits, loads and unloads containers at a port. Well, this picture and the little capsule that is created to train people to become operators of this crane is from Mavia Corporation. It's a Finnish corporation. It's mechatronics and virtual engineering applications. It's a training simulator. Mavia says that it can train an operator for this crane in half the time at 1/10 of the cost. An important area for you then would be various kinds of devices. Well, we know that the military pilots have had simulators. This is a simulator. This person isn't up in a real plane. So this virtuality has a lot of opportunities. For you personally, it may mean that you can learn various computer skills. It may mean you can learn to play the piano better or begin to learn to play it. A lot of possibilities. It means that not only training, but it means through the virtuality that you can be open for business around the clock. Well, some megatrends have been around for a number of years, decades, maybe as in the case of the move to services in terms of jobs, megatrend number 10. It's been around for 100, 200 years. We think of electricity as having been around for many hundreds of years, but the fact of the matter is it really started perhaps 100 years ago. And this chart shows the tremendous increase. If you go back beyond, say, 100 years ago, you go back to, say, Benjamin Franklin, the only electricity he knew was something like lightning. But there's going to be a lot more electricity in your future, as there has been, as it has grown in the past. Now, there is some concern that will there be enough electricity because of the concerns about, the global warming and having to cut back on coal-fired plants. But as Thomas Edison pictured here, knew and forecast even back in his time, there are all kinds of ways to generate electricity, and I've got the feeling we're not going to run out of electricity and the growth will continue dramatically. Of course, we're familiar with wind power or nuclear or solar. How about tide power? And obviously Edison knew all about Niagara Falls and hydroelectric power. I want to make, though, now a forecast for you personally, that in your life, electricity will take on even a greater role. And my forecast for you is that your next car, well, and if not your next car, certainly the one after it, will be an electric car. An electric car? Well, yes, but maybe not like this one. That's a 1909 Brady. It's being driven by, you see the fella in there waving his hand? That's Jay Leno, the comedian, and he's driving that Brady around. He loves it, loves to drive around in his compound. You are more likely to perhaps have a subcompact like this car that's being charged up in Manchester, England, or, of course, the Chevrolet General Motors Volt that's come out. Maybe you would be getting here. This is the Nissan Leaf, neat little car. But yeah, your next car will be an electric. This is the one I wish for you. This is the Tesla. You can buy it right now. 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds. Yeah, there will be more electricity in your future. Meet Walter Bruning. There he is. He's not Methuselah. Methuselah, the Bible says, I think was like 800 years old. I first saw Walter Bruning on the McNeil Lehrer News Hour, and they were asking him about something, and he was very articulate, very interesting. For many, many years, he was worked on the railroad in the Pacific North, in the upper Midwest, and I thought maybe he was, if I'd have guessed, I would have said maybe in his late 60s, something like that. Well, I discovered that no, Walter Bruning just celebrated his 114th birthday. And now let me forecast my number 2 forecast for you personally. And that forecast is that you will live to 100. Well, when you look at the progress that mankind has made from life expectancy from 30-something to now, you would say, well, probably 80-something. It's not outrageous that you wouldn't live to 100, and that's what I forecast. Now, you might say, oh, there's another one of those good news, bad news things. The good news is I lived to 100. The bad news is it's no fun. Well, let me introduce you to Dorian Paskowitz. He's 88. And you say, yeah, the old geezer, he's bent over. Well, no, he's actually not bent over. He is just ducked under that border guard barrier, and he's just coming up. And also, he's carrying 2 surfboards. You see the second surf? Well, maybe you can't see the second surfboard so well. He's having fun. He's a retired physician, lives in Hawaii. Twice a year, Dorian goes to this place and crosses the border. This is the border into Gaza Strip. And twice a year he goes there, and he takes 2 old surfboards, which he donates, and he trains Palestinian youth to surf the Mediterranean. Dorian says that's his own one-man peace plan. She's working on Excel spreadsheets, so we'll leave her alone. But you might recognize some of these folks, all of which are well over 80 years of age, and they're having fun. There's Queen Elizabeth in the lower right. The only one here that you might not recognize is that gray-haired lady sort of with the red jacket. This is a picture taken of her when she was giving a speech on behalf of her son, who was a candidate for political office. Am I teasing you? Do you recognize her now? That's John McCain's mother. That's Roberta McCain, 98 years old, and don't get in her way. Do you know that Hallmark is getting close to selling 90 to 100,000 happy 100th birthday cards? You want to get ready for it. Let me switch now to a little more, unfortunately, serious subject, and that's terrorism. We've always had problems with folks like that, but we see this as increasing in the next 20 years and being more of a problem for you and something you're going to have to defend yourself against. Why? Three reasons. The first is we know that most terrorist type activity, there's some kind of a philosophy or belief. Call it an ism. So it might be Nazism, socialism, communism, capitalism, nationalism, tribalism, Muslimism, and whatever. But they're they're runaway in the sense that there's no tolerance. The tolerance is lessening. So it's not just that there's a different belief or ism, but the sense that if you don't pay attention to their beliefs or you somehow are not sensitive to them, they'll do bad things to you. The other thing that's so unfortunate, the second element here that makes the terrorist is so dangerous, is that non-combatants aren't left alone. When you go back into centuries past, and if you get in the way of the marching armies and Napoleon, you got a problem. But if you try to kind of stay out of their way, they're not going out after you. The modern terrorist, there seems to be no limits. Third, maybe I should call this rather than super weapons. Yeah, it's super weapons like the nuclear bomb in the suitcase, but I'm thinking more like clever, nasty weapons like sarin gas in Japanese subways or poisoning the water in New York or whatever it might be. These are things that make terrorists much more dangerous in the next 20 years. And the bottom line here is that we must defend ourselves from them. And we in California are way ahead of the rest of the nation, in part because we have our little disaster kits and that sort of thing for earthquakes, and what we need to do is beef them up. I ask people about this fertility aspect, call it megatrend number 2, where's the babies? And normally I find that most people in my audiences are not really aware of this tremendous decline in the number of children that women around the world, this lower number of children, we'll call it female fertility. Now, on this chart, you can see the green bars, that's 1975. And the red bars are 2005. So, a while ago. But you can see, for example, in Mexico, 6, 7 kids in a family. But currently, it's just above the replacement level. You see that dotted red line? That's the replacement level. So Mexico's gone from 6, 7 kids down to 2 and some. The world as a whole has plunged in terms of the number of children. Look at China. Look how that's plunged. We know today that the workforce, the actual number of people in the workforce in China, has begun to decline, and it will decline every year for the next 20 years, and perhaps beyond that. What's going on in China? Well, remember that one-child policy? Well, that and a lot of other factors that are affecting countries across the globe, they're causing a fertility rate to go down and down and down. South Korea has gone from 4 or 5 kids in a family to maybe, on average, 1, which means a lot of people don't have any children. Who cares? You do, because you remember your 401k that you're saving stocks and bonds for your retirement? And, the house or condo that you bought because it's a good investment? Well, didn't you kind of have the idea that you were kind of hiving up, you were sort of saving the acorns for your retirement? Well, if there are actually fewer people coming up in terms of children, growing up around the world, Who's going to buy those stocks from you when you're ready to retire? Ooh, who's going to buy, let's say you have a pretty substantial house and you figure this is okay because even though the prices come down in the recent recession, why, prices will come back, but it's still at a reasonable level, and I can sell that and I can use those proceeds for my retirement. If there are fewer children coming forward, who's going to buy your house? The green line here is globally, kids under 5. The next generation isn't coming through in such great numbers. You're going to be given by most countries and world census people and so forth a head fake, because they're going to be telling you that the populations are growing. Population is growing. And this chart shows us why workforce is declining. That's affecting us economically, slower growth. And yet they're telling me population is increasing? Yes, it's because of the other megatrend on longevity. You can see that's globally, those 60 years and older, how that expands dramatically as we go out to 2050. This has major implications that require you to do more saving, requires governments to begin looking at programs. Well, the first boomer to take Social Security, meet Kathleen Casey Kirschling. She's the first boomer. She's the first person in her generation. She was born January 1st. She was the first one born in 1946 on January 1st. She retired as a school teacher in New Jersey, and when she hit 62 in January of 2008, of course, she immediately ran down to her Social Security office. Here she is seen, she's pictured with Social Security Commissioner Michael Astrew as she signs up to get Social Security. Well, at age 62, she doesn't get the full amount, but she doesn't care. She wants, give me some money while at least there's something still there. Well, before we go on to megatrend number 1 and our final megatrend, let's kind of review what we've looked at so far. Megatrend number 10, you remember those ladies in Bhutan, representatives, if you will, of agriculture? We could see that this trend, which started 200 years ago, it has another 100 years to go. It's moving everybody really towards services. In the United States, we've gone from 90-some% agricultural workers to 2%. A very powerful trend. And then in megatrend number 9, we looked at basically the miniaturization and the making things smaller in the world. And we were introduced to, remember what a nano is? 1/1,000th. We were introduced to nanotechnology. In megatrend number 8, we said, well, this is really environmental concerns. But we concentrated on global warming because that's more what people are talking about. But the bottom line that we saw here is that this is a very powerful, important trend, but that you have to watch very carefully and keep researching it because it changes the way that people view it, and it changes its definition. And in order to profit from it or defend yourself from it, you have to be aware of those changes. Well, we met O.J. Simpson, saw that he had a bit of a problem because he didn't seem to understand that people are watching you and that, yes, privacy is pretty much dead. In megatrend number 6, we looked at the virtual world. Yeah, the bubbleheads are people that are kind of living in their own world. Remember the little girl with the dolly, but remember that most of us with our cell phones and our Blackberries and our iPads and so on, we're in that virtual world as well, but one which has extremely powerful opportunities in education particularly, and in training and in entertainment. Number 5, I gave the first of my 2 forecasts for you personally. And that was, hey, you're going to be electrified. You're going to be getting an electric car. And of course, I had a nice one there for you in that little roadster. Well, did you feel when I mentioned megatrend number 4 and forecast the second personal forecast for you that you're going to live to 100? Well, we met Walter Bruning and we met Dorian Paskowitz and we even met John McCain's mother. But that's going to be a very, very powerful type of a megatrend, and it's going to be tied in with megatrend number 2 that we just talked about. And we talked a little bit about terrorism and how we might understand it a little bit better than perhaps defend ourselves against it. But yes, in megatrend number 2, we said this is taking on enormous importance as we go forward, and it has some meaning for you and personally for your savings and your retirement. Well, I want to end with megatrend number 1, and it's a megatrend that we hesitated, and that's really examining America, the U.S. Is America still number 1? I mean, we do lots of things like this Mars rover running around, but I looked at 25 different factors. I'll just share half a dozen or so with you here to try to address this question of whether America is still, as the Chinese would put it, hegemony. That's, dominating things and so forth and so on. To see what that answer is. Is America still number 1? We know in economic output, you can see it there. America exceeds everybody else by a very large margin. Now, I can adjust this for purchasing power parity and some other ways and kind of increase some of the other people's GDP number, but America, U.S., is still number 1. I would say, kind of half-jokingly, that the other thing that I concluded from our research is that America is number 1 in humility. Now, that may shock people who are our foreign critics, but the reason I say this is that we Americans have never felt we were number 1, and we would kind of deny, we're number 1, but we would deny our economic strength. And, well, what do I mean? I have literature from very smart people back 50, 60 years ago who were saying that America was number 1 in economic output, but it would very soon be taken over, maybe in 5, 10 years by, do you remember who that was? The Soviet Union. And of course the Soviet Union not only agreed with that, said absolutely. Well, didn't turn out that way, did it? And of course, we immediately went to stage 2 of humility, where we found another country that was going to exceed our economic growth and pass up the U.S. Do you remember who that was? Japan. Yeah. That didn't quite happen. And we're still humble because we know Japan isn't going to pass us up. So we've now picked another country that absolutely, well, not this year, but certainly within 5 and 10 years will pass up the U.S. And that's China. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's my forecast. And then I moved from economic dominance to military spending as a measure. And there's no doubt about who spends the most money. Does it matter? Well, the former dictator of Russia, Joseph Stalin, once was in his office, and an aide came rushing in and said, oh, sir, the Pope is very angry with you. And Stalin just brushed him aside and said, how many divisions does the Pope have? Well, to some people, military spending really is the big deal. And there's no doubt that Stalin would look at this number and he would have no problem figuring out who was number 1. But I wanted to then also look at maybe a softer type of a measure or index. So I looked at philanthropic giving as a percent of GDP, adjusted for GDP. So it's really not the wealthiest nations, but it's how much do you give? And the U.S. was number one here. And Nancy said, Victor, I don't know. That could be just like big gifts from Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, something like that. You better check into it. And I did. And I discovered pretty quickly that no, it's really it's you and me giving money to the alumni fund, to church, to the United Way, into the Bucket and Salvation Army. I also looked at, I suppose it's the greatest gift, and that's the gift of life. Organ donor rates adjusted per million population. Once again, the United States is number one. Well, I would like to end this question with a story about this young man, introduce you to this young fellow. He was born and raised on the second floor of this house in Austria. His father was a police officer. The young man was very bright, very ambitious, and the other villagers said, well, you know, what you probably ought to do is go to the United States, go to America. And he did that. He came to America. He worked very hard. He was incredibly successful. Today he's a very, very wealthy man. He's a celebrity. He's very well known all over the world. And if you asked this young man who now has grown up, is America number one? He would probably start by telling you that whenever he goes back to New York, he always looks for his girlfriend. Whether he's booking a hotel, he'd like to get a room where he's got a view of what he calls his girlfriend, the Statue of Liberty. He says, I'm so happy that I came to America. And he became a citizen. He's not in this group, but he is so proud of becoming a citizen. And you know, if you asked this young man, now grown up, you know that Arnold Schwarzenegger would say that America's number one. There he is, the young man from Austria, now the former governor of the state of California, the Terminator. And the good part, beyond even Arnold, is how many others, millions, who came to America, saw the promise, made something out of themselves. Yeah, they would say America's still number one. Yes, still number one. Catherine Lee Bates, a college teacher from Massachusetts, in 1893 was vacationing in the mountains of Colorado, and one evening she was watching the sunset and those beautiful hills, and she scribbled down a little poem which she thought was pretty nice about America. She had no idea that decades later it would be turned into a song which would become one of the most important and popular. Do you recognize the words that Bates wrote? She wrote, "Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea." Still number one. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming this evening. God bless America.